Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. Welcome to the Minnesota Sports Podcast. My name is Connor Philippi, and thank you for joining me as we have both people listening on Anchor and Spotify, as well as everyone on YouTube. So if you're watching on any of the other platforms, do keep in mind I do have a YouTube channel for this. I do have a Spotify podcast, and then the host site for that is Anchor. So if you want to listen or watch on any of those platforms, make sure you go and follow all of them. Like I said, my name's Connor Philippi, and I just recently graduated from college. And if you noticed me around YouTube or anything like that, I did do a few episodes of this podcast back when I was in college. Decided I didn't want to do it back then because of the time commitment with all my school and everything like that, all the other projects I had going on. But now I'm graduated from college, and I want to make this a full-time thing. I want to commit to regular uploads. I've done radio and everything in the past. So I've always kind of had this as my passion, especially with sports. So I wanted to keep that going. So if you want to follow along on the journey and subscribe and like my videos, I really would appreciate it. And again, if you want to transition to listening in the car, make sure you swing over to my other platforms. So just kind of a little overarching kind of explanation of what I'm going to be doing here. This is obviously the name Minnesota Sports Podcast. I will be mostly focusing on Minnesota sports, but I'm going to be still doing plenty of not Minnesota sports content, just general sports content across the board. In fact, my very next video is going to be breaking down the NFL season as a whole, kind of predicting the division winners and where everyone's going to be in the NFL standings at the end of the year. So make sure you tune in, even if you're not a Vikings fan or any other sports fan. I'm going to be covering every single sport and even the college sports, mainly focusing on football and baseball, and also, like I said, focusing on Minnesota sports. But plenty of content for everyone to watch, so I thank everyone who wants to watch and kind of follow along on my journey. So going into what this video and podcast is going to be about, I'm going to be breaking down the Minnesota Vikings offseason and kind of just talking about what I expect to happen this season, some of the things that are a little unknown about this Vikings team that continues to break our hearts year after year, and why I'm a little more optimistic about this year than other years would suggest. So let's start things off by talking about the offseason, starting with the acquisitions and also players that we lost. And we'll begin with the main guy that we lost, which was Michael Pierce. He played in our interior defensive line. And it's kind of unfortunate because based off of the interviews that I saw of this guy and some of the mic'd up clips and everything like that, obviously you can't speculate too much, but he seemed like a great guy. So it's unfortunate that we had to let him go, but it just didn't seem to work out with, his decision, which was completely not really up to him with his heart issues and him opting out of the 2020 COVID season. And then last year he got hurt, and it just didn't seem to work out. So we got rid of him and kind of upgraded our defensive line by adding Harrison Phillips and Zadaria Smith. These are two guys that I'm really excited about seeing. Harrison Phillips being a lot more of a run-stuffing kind of guy. He's going to be in our interior defensive line. He's going to be our nose tackle. And then we've got Zadaria Smith, who I'm really excited to see. Former Packers player who's going to be playing alongside Danielle Hunter in a normal defensive, I don't want to say normal, but in the way we've lined it up as the past, would be kind of an edge rusher type guy. But I'll kind of explain the 3-4 in a little bit because we're going to be kind of moving to a different defensive approach. And then we also gained Jordan Hicks, who is going to be one of our linebackers alongside Eric Kendricks, who I'm really excited for that duo, which I'm about to explain. And then we've got Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth Jr., who we drafted. Currently a backup for both of them in our depth chart, but I see them potentially rising above the ranks because Cameron Dantzler isn't exactly a lock to continue in that cornerback spot as we continue with the regular season. And then Cameron Bynum kind of impressed last year, but again, nothing's guaranteed. Lewis Seen is a very talented player, and he could rise to the top as well. So guys that definitely are impact players still and big-time players that we gained, as well as Ed Ingram, who on most NFL starting offensive lines probably wouldn't be there as a starter, but on our struggling offensive line, he's going to be a nice addition. So a lot of good additions that we made over the offseason that I think are going to positively impact this team, especially considering we didn't do any kind of defensive overhaul. Our overhaul is more changing to the 3-4 rather than our typical approach, and I think that was a really good decision to move away from that. So let's look into a little bit of the positives that came from training camp and preseason before we get into a couple negatives. So positives I saw, first of all, the vibes at camp just seem to be a lot more loose just in general. People seem to be a lot more, they weren't unfocused necessarily, but it just seemed like there was a lot more happy players just having a good time, obviously still playing very hard, and have a lot of respect for the head coach. But it just seemed like players were more stiff last offseason, and you can tell through the TCO interviews that they did, just everyone seems so just stiff, not having fun, just rigid and not emotional at all. And this year just seems so much different. You know, O'Connell seems like such an approachable guy, an approachable coach that players have a lot of respect for in a different way. You know, people had respect for Zimmer in the sense of, I'm afraid of him, I have to respect him as a coach, I have to give him credit as a coach. O'Connell's a guy that players respect because you can have a conversation with him. Yeah, obviously these are things I just heard. I wasn't at training camp on the lines with the guys, but just things that you see through interviews and everything, you can kind of tell some of the culture change that's going on, where O'Connell's a guy you can approach, ask questions, maybe even suggest things that you should try. And Adam Thielen talked a lot about that during his offseason talks with the Common Man and a lot of guys on KFan. That's one of the things he said, is that he said that O'Connell, you can go up to him and say, hey, this is something we tried last year, let's try this maybe. And O'Connell's pride isn't getting in the way of that and saying, oh, well, I'm not going to use a coach from previous regimes' ideas. He's completely open to all of his players and having a dialogue, and that's something that I really like about him as well. On top of that, Eric Kendricks and Hicks seem to really have hit it off and developed a lot of chemistry early. Another thing I like about Kevin O'Connell is the way he's kind of brought this team together has resulted in a lot of good chemistry shifts where the players seem to all be more of a family than other years. And again, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know what's going on, but it's just something you get a feeling for when you hear these interviews and you see all these people talking about the team and what they like and don't like about the team. I apologize. I don't know why my chair is so squeaky. Anyway, but Kendricks and Hicks seem to have a lot of good chemistry together in the way they're playing in the linebacker position, and that's a very important position right across the middle of the field to be always on lock with each other and with cornerbacks and just understanding what's going on all the time. So I do really like that as well. And finally, another positive from training camp is Christian Darrisaw seems to be looking really good, and he is hopefully due for a transcendent year this year. In his second year, and he got high praise also from Trent Williams, who said a lot of players say he's looking like the new Trent Williams, and Trent Williams even said himself he had high praise for Christian Darrisaw. So those things are all looking really good for our team. A couple negatives from training camp. First of all, if you're on the more pessimistic side of Kevin O'Connell, you could argue are the vibes at TCO a little too relaxed? Are players seeing Kevin O'Connell more as a friend and a cool dad type of character as more of a coach you have to respect? Because there is a little bit of an aspect of, getting your guys in line and making sure there's no one screwing around. If you're on the pessimistic side, that's an argument you could have, is that maybe players are too relaxed, because you want players to be loose. You don't want them to be relaxed. You want them to be playing more loosey-goosey, having kind of more fun, and it allows them to be more locked in and focused rather than rigid. But if they're too relaxed, they might be taking their eye off the ball. So one thing we need to watch for sure is with these positive vibes, with Kevin O'Connell being this cool coach, as well as the fact that none of these players really even played in the preseason if you're on the starting roster. Is that going to be an issue in the first game of the season? Are people going to be left sleeping or napping? Hopefully that's not the case, but we'll have to see there. Also, the second negative is that Garrett Bradbury is looking pretty rough. He's getting roughed around by the defensive line all over the place from the clips that everyone's seen. and that can be definitely an issue. You don't want a whole lot of pressure up the middle, because if someone's getting pressure up the middle every single time, there's really not much that Danielle Hunter and what am I talking about? Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw can really do about that. If you can try and lock up things kind of near you if things are going south, but right there up the middle, it's really just Garrett Bradbury's territory. And if he's letting guys go, there's going to be issues, especially with runs up the middle and things like that. Thankfully, Kevin O'Connell seems to be focusing on some outside runs, not quite as many just drive down the middle like the traditional old-fashioned Mike Zimmer plays that he drew up all the time. So hopefully that it doesn't end up being an issue. And I definitely do see a lot more runs on the outside with Garrett Bradbury looking as roughy as he is. So hopefully Kevin O'Connell just doesn't run too many plays on the outside like that it starts getting predictable. But that's another negative, is that Garrett Bradbury kind of concerning, and hopefully that is not too much of an issue going forward. Final statements before I make some predictions and kind of go game by game. I'm going to go full breakdown, not too long of a breakdown, but kind of a breakdown of every single game we play, and kind of make a prediction and have a final record for you. I will tease the division winner, but I'm not going to really reveal where the Vikings are going to stand in the playoffs yet, because I don't want to reveal too much of my NFL full predictions video that I do next. But we'll have a full record for you. So, final statements before my predictions. First of all, with the right mindset, I feel like this team has the potential to go very far. I feel like there's a lot of things that could go right, a lot of things that can go wrong. It might come down to whether or not Kevin O'Connell can handle some of the early adversity that he's going to face as a coach, because even young coaches, even first-year coaches can deal with, trying to get some wins, and when things go right, when you're going with those plays you've been working on all year long that are going to obviously work out right away, all of a sudden when other teams start having you figured out, when things are going wrong, when you've got injuries with players, and when things are not quite as hunky-dory as they were at the beginning of the season, is Kevin O'Connell going to be able to lead this team and come up with plan Bs and plan Cs and all the way to plan Z by the time the season's over? Are those things that he can handle? Next, with Zimmer gone, this is less of a question or a prediction than just a statement. With Zimmer gone, there's really no excuse for this team left besides offensive line and defense, which is something that the team itself can deal with. With Zimmer, it was all like, oh man, we could be winning so many more games if Zimmer wasn't calling this play or that play. And I agreed, and I still do agree that with Zimmer gone, we're going to be winning more games because of the decision-making, the clock management, and just giving players more opportunities, taking more risks. I think that's going to win us more games. But if it doesn't, there's no more excuses left. It's going to be just on the team. And I would not blame Kevin O'Connell if we end up in the same position this year as we were last year. Obviously, we haven't seen Kevin O'Connell coach a regular season game yet, so that might be kind of a speculative thing to say, but based on what I've been seeing, it's going to be all on the team if we don't pull our own weight this year, especially in his first season as a head coach. Next, Kirk Cousins still has to overcome a kind of shaky offensive line and a poor defense by the Vikings this season. The defense should be a little better, but it's still definitely not going to be top 10 or maybe even not top 15. So Kirk Cousins still has to overcome the same things he's been overcoming all season or all his career. But it is true, and it is pretty evident at this point, that with Kevin O'Connell coming in, Zimmer's not limiting him anymore. This is Kirk Cousins' best opportunity that he's had all his career to kind of rise above the ranks, to prove some of the haters wrong, and to show that he actually is a great starting quarterback, to show that he's a great starting quarterback in the NFL. And he can lead this team with the offensive weapons he has. He now is going to have full range of a playbook. He's going to be able to take some risks down the field, and he's not going to be limited to dump-offs like he has in the past with Mike Zimmer. No draws on 3rd and 11. None of that stupid stuff. This is now going to be an opportunity for Kirk Cousins to make this team his. Zimmer had a stranglehold on it for years. finally, this is Kirk Cousins' team to work with. It's his team. Kevin O'Connell is going to give him the reins in a lot of situations, and this is going to be his opportunity to prove people wrong finally. And finally, I think a huge factor this year is going to be Zadaria Smith and Danielle Hunter staying healthy. The health of those two players will be a huge factor in the success of this team because everyone knows that the edge rush and pressure on the quarterback makes cornerbacks look better than they are. Sorry, cornerbacks, not quarterbacks. It's going to make cornerbacks look a lot better when the pass rush is constantly getting pressure on the QB and forcing errant passes and forcing quarterbacks to throw before they know anyone's open. And like I said, it makes cornerbacks look a lot better. And our secondary, our deep secondary, is our issue. So if we can get Danielle Hunter and Zadaria Smith constantly forcing pressure on the QB all season long, it can make a huge difference on our defense and put a lot of pressure off of the offense and let them really cook and be a lot more loose as they go throughout the game. So all those factors to break down, and let's get to the game-by-game predictions, starting with Week 1, only a few days from now, versus the Packers. And people are going to call me optimistic and overly optimistic and biased no matter what predictions I make, unless I say this team wins 6 games or less. So I'm just going to embrace that and say that we're going to win Week 1 against the Packers. First off, the Packers always start slow, and I'm not going to be one of those people that are like, oh, the Packers suck. They're still going to be good without Davante Adams. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not going to be one of those Vikings fans that acts like Rodgers isn't one of the best quarterbacks in this game and top 10 all time. He is. But the Packers seem to start off slow a lot of times in the beginning of the season, and last year they sure did. And Rodgers also needs some time to establish a rapport with some of these young wide receivers. You know, Sammy Watkins is not the wide receiver he used to be, and Rodgers, I think, is only throwing to one wide receiver in Allen Lazard that he started throwing to last year. So it's a complete change of the guard. Even with some of the guys that aren't the best wide receivers that he had last year, they're even gone. So it's not even just a factor of he's throwing to bad wide receivers. He's throwing to completely new wide receivers. I think that'll be an issue. And the Vikings will eke out a win. 27-24 will be my prediction for that one, and we'll go up 1-0. Week 2 at the Eagles. I think this one is going to be a loss. The Vikings always seem to go up against these tough teams in prime time. Anytime there's a team that can kind of swing either way, it's an away game. So all the people saying, man, Kirk Cousins can't win primetime games. Look at some of the primetime games we've had the past 5 seasons. It's ridiculous. We always play teams like the Cowboys. I know the Sunday night game last year didn't go well, and that was Cooper Rush. I get that. But other teams we seem to play, always the Packers. That year we played the Saints when they were really good. I mean, we always seem to play good teams in prime time. So that's sometimes part of the factor. On top of all that, I do kind of believe in Hurts this year. I think that he is going to at least do enough to win a lot of games for the Eagles. Eagles fans, as toxic as they are also very loud and passionate. That's going to be a big factor. And I think this Eagles defense is also very underrated. I think that they've got a lot of guys that can be difference makers. And I think that in addition, like A.J. Brown is going to kind of elevate the entire offense. It's going to give Devontae Smith a lot more opportunities because now there's 2 different threats and he's not the lone guy that's being double teamed. I think Devontae Smith's going to break out this year too. And the Vikings flying high off of a Packers win, I think, is going to be humbled a little bit and go down to 1-1. I say this is a 28-21 game. Week 3 versus the Lions. I have this as a win, but I want to say we cannot underestimate the Lions this year. I think that they're going to be playing with a lot more jump. They're going to be playing with a whole lot of passion. I've been watching some of the Hard Knocks episodes thanks to my fiance's subscription for free that she gets with her college. I've been binge watching shows because she's going to graduate in like 6-7 months. So I have to get everything watched before we don't get that subscription anymore. But anyway, I've been watching Hard Knocks, and the Lions, their culture is just unmatched. It seems like I haven't seen a Hard Knocks episode where there's a better culture than the Lions seem to have there in Detroit right now. And going off of last year, they did not give up on any games. They beat the Vikings that one week to get their first win. They almost beat the Ravens. I mean, this is a team that only won a couple games all season, but they easily could have won 5 with the way they fought hard. And I do expect them to be a 5-6 win team. And I don't think they'll get this win, but they will never let up. And I think it'll be a closer game than anticipated, but I think we'll get some sort of late touchdown and win 30-20. Week 4, London at the Saints. And I know this is going to be another one where people call me biased because Vikings fans hate the Saints. I don't hate the Saints as much as I used to now that Sean Payton's gone, but I still think that we're going to get a win here technically at the Saints, but it's in London. I don't believe in Jameis Winston the same way other people do. He is still very turnover prone. A couple years out of the Buccaneers did not change that for him. And yes, he did have a few good weeks before he got hurt last year, but I need to see more of him before I believe that he's really going to be able to lead this Saints team to the promised land. Michael Thomas could still be a good wide receiver, but it feels like he hasn't played in 3 years, so who really knows? I need to see more from him. On top of all those things, it just seems like this Saints defense is the only bright point of this team. And I think it'll be a tough, gritty game. And with a lot of players playing under the lights in London for the first time, I think we'll win this one 23-20. So that puts us at 3-1. And that'll improve to 4-1 when we play the Bears the next week. I get that there's the London lag, and I'll give us a loss next week for that reason. But there's going to be some lag. We're going to be dealing with that. But I believe the Bears are a bottom 5 team this year, honestly. And I think Daniil's going to feast on this offensive line. I think that Justin Fields is going to need to play out of his mind if the Bears are even going to win 7 or 8 games this year. I don't think they'll do that. I believe they'll be a team that wins 4 or less, and I think the Vikings are going to get this win pretty easily against the Bears this year. Again, I'm not biased against the Bears. I just think they're going to suck. If I'm being honest, they're going to be tanking hard. They even lost a good few pieces of their defense that kept them in contention last year. So we win against the Bears, improve to 4-1. And like I mentioned, week 6 at the Dolphins is going to be a loss. I think that the London leg is finally going to catch up with us here. I also don't think we have the secondary to keep up with Tyreek Hill the way people think we can. Of course, it will all depend on whether or not Tua can get the ball out to him or not. There's a lot of concern about how powerful Tua's arm can really be throwing the ball deep. Has he not been throwing deep just because he hasn't had a good deep target, or is it just an issue he's having with getting the ball deep? We're going to have to see, and I'll break down the Dolphins a lot more in my prediction in a couple days, breaking down the NFL going into the season. But I think this is going to be a kind of a, not necessarily a trap game, but just one where we don't have a break after London. Bears is kind of like a bye week, but the lag is going to catch up to us. We're going to lose that game. I'm going to say it's kind of a rough run for us, 27-17. So that brings us down to 4-2. A week 7 bye is kind of gross any other season, but it's very well needed. After we play a game in London, it's kind of rough having to play a game in London week 5 or week 4 that early in the season. So it's good that we get a week 7 bye there. And then we've got week 8 versus the Cardinals. I think this is going to be a loss. I believe in the Cardinals a lot more than I think a lot of other people do, honestly. I think that people are saying they don't even think the Cardinals will be a playoff team this year. So next we have week 8 against the Cardinals. This is at home against the Cardinals. I do think this will be a loss to put us at 4-3. I believe in the Cardinals more this year than most people would. I think that Kyler is kind of quarterback that we struggle against a lot. Mobile, strong arm down the field. He's going to be the kind of quarterback that having good pass rushers like Daniil and Zadaria isn't going to have as much of an effect, because even with him being chased around all over the place by Zadaria and Daniil, I still think he's going to be able to get a lot of deep balls down the field. And he might not have a lot of receivers to work with at the beginning of the season, but at this point he'll have DeAndre Hopkins back, which I don't understand why people think DeAndre Hopkins is all of a sudden not going to be a great wide receiver. He had one situation last year where he was kind of struggling. He got hurt, he got a suspension, and now after maybe a year full of not playing, people are saying he's not even going to be a good wide receiver when a year ago we were calling him the best wide receiver in football, or at least I was. So there is going to be a drop-off, as it always happens with wide receivers who spend that long away from the game. But he's not going to be a bad wide receiver. He's going to put up great numbers still and be a huge asset for Kyler Murray. And I think that's going to be the addition in Week 8 that's going to put the Cardinals ahead of us. I'm going to say we win that one or lose that one 31-20 and fall to 4-3. So halfway through the schedule here, Week 9 at Commanders. I'm going to say we win that one. I think it's going to be a good comeback win against a team that I really don't have a lot of faith in. Defensively, they've got a lot going. Chase Young is a great addition for them a couple years ago, and I think that with a lot of injuries that happened last year to their defensive line, all of a sudden now they're going to have one of the better defensive lines in football. That being said, I have no faith in their offense. Carson Wentz is 4 or 5 years removed at this point from his last good season. And I think it'll be a low-scoring game because I think Washington's defense will keep them in it a little more. But I still think we'll win this one 23-13. No faith in Washington whatsoever this year. And maybe that'll come back to bite me. But usually when it involves Wentz, it doesn't. Week 10 at the Bills. This will be the easiest loss I'm calling all year. I think that it's overstated at this point. I think a lot of the media is talking about the Bills a whole lot, and people are starting to get a little annoyed about it. But I do think, and I do agree, that the Bills are the team to beat this year. I think they're the most well-rounded team in the league. They really don't have many weaknesses. They have star power everywhere, and I'm really excited for the Thursday night game when they face the Rams. That'll be a fun game to predict in a video in a couple days. But I think we'll lose this game 33-23. Diggs will have the last laugh in this game, and we'll fall to 5-4. Week 11 versus the Cowboys, I think this will be a win. It's always a close game when we play the Cowboys, and the last 2 times we played the Cowboys, we lost, and both times they had their backup quarterback in, which is very embarrassing. But that was the Zim era. We don't like to talk about the Zim era. And the Vikings, I think, will outshine them this time, especially with the Cowboys being without Amari Cooper after trading him to the Cleveland Browns. I think that it's going to be a tightly contested game, and I think that when you got a defense with Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, there's always going to be some contention there, but I think the Vikings should eke this one out. This will be another field goal type game. They win by 27-24 of a score, and I think that'll put us up 6-4 on the season. Week 12 versus the Patriots, I think this will be a win as well. We're going to start a winning streak here. I always believe in Bill Belichick to a degree, but I just don't believe in Mac Jones at all. I feel like he's the type of quarterback, and this is what I thought this whole time, even before he was drafted. I think he has a ceiling, and if you have a good enough team around him, he's a kind of guy that will manage your team, will get you to where you need to go if you give him the right pieces around him. And I just don't think this offense or defense is good enough to be built around him to really make noise. And I think the Vikings should be able to win this one, especially at home. So I have that as a 28-17 win, improving us to 7-4. Yeah, I got that right, 7-4. Week 13 versus the Jets, that'll be an easy win. The Jets have done some team building a little bit. They've gotten a little better than last year, but they're definitely not good enough to avoid a blowout from us. I think it'll be 30-17 there. Next, we have Week 14 at the Lions, and the 8-4 Vikings will lose this game to the Lions. The Vikings, like I said, are going to underestimate the Lions a little too much. They were able to beat them earlier in the year, but I think that they're going to underestimate them a little too much this time. Like I said, the culture is incredible there, and they're going to grit out a lot of games by sheer power of will. This is going to be one of them, I think. So that's going to put us at 8-5 so far for the season. Week 15 versus Colts. I think that's going to be a win as well. We're going to be 9-5. I just don't feel like I believe in Matt Ryan enough. I think that he doesn't have enough left in the tank to lead a Colts team very deep. I think that they're going to kind of contend for the playoffs. I just don't think they're going to get there in the stacked AFC this year. It's a little bit of a giveaway for my video on Thursday, but I don't think the Colts are going to really have enough of a receiving core to revitalize Matt Ryan's career. The Colts defense is good, but I don't think it's good enough to get them the win here against the Vikings, especially with this being a home game for the Vikings. So I think we're going to win this one 28-17. Week 16 versus the Giants, I think this is going to be a win as well. It's the last prove-it year for Daniel Jones. I think that he's not going to prove himself in this game. There's a few glimmer of hopes for this team, but I don't think it's going to be good enough yet. So we'll win this one 27-17. So then going into this one, we're going to be 10-5, and I think it's going to be a loss at the Packers. I think the Packers at Lambeau Field have not been our friend for years and years, just the way it is. And I think Kirk is going to be outdueled in this game by Aaron Rodgers. At this point, Rodgers will have enough of a rapport with his wide receivers that he's going to at least do enough to get past us. So that's going to put the Vikings at 10-6 going into the last game of the season against the Bears. I think this will be a win. I think it's going to be an interesting game, a tougher matchup than expected, a pretty close one because the Vikings always struggle a little bit at Soldier Field. They never play their full best at Soldier Field. I do think they're going to come out on top for this one, which means I have the final Vikings record to be 11-6. And there's going to be a lot of people calling me biased. There's going to be people saying that's not high enough, that's not low enough. I know that it was Colin Cowherd that said the Vikings were going to go, you say 14-3 or something like that. I'm not going to go that far. If you're not a Vikings fan and you've been falling asleep through this whole video, wake up right now because I'm going to be providing a full NFL breakdown. Make sure you watch that one next on Thursday. It's going to be a lot of fun. And again, some reminders for you. I have this also on Spotify that you can listen to in your car on the way to work, or you can also listen to it on the host platform, Anchor, which is hosting the podcast and then just ships it out to Spotify. So wherever you listen to podcasts, you can also listen there. Or not wherever you listen. I just literally explained that there's only two. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Make sure you listen anywhere you want to. Continue. Please follow. And I would love to continue to get this content out to all of you. So make sure you subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you know when these videos will come out. And also one more reminder to follow my Instagram. It's just the Minnesotan Sports Podcast, just like the name here on YouTube. So make sure you follow me there. I will also be making uploads, kind of explaining when videos come out there too, kind of explaining my upload schedule I plan on coming out with. I think there'll be very specific dates that I'm going to be coming out with NFL content, and then in between I'll pepper in some more stuff about the MLB going into the playoffs, and there'll be a lot of exciting stuff in store. NBA and NHL are already about to start up. I always say that October is the best sports month ever because all four major sports are going on at the same time at some point there. So a lot of exciting stuff in store. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this one. Make sure you stay tuned for the next video that's coming on Thursday, and I'll see you on the flip side.